Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. We have public participation. We have, is he wanting to speak during public? Okay. We have one, Mr. Eric Miller. Asked that you would, if you do care to speak to us at all. Okay, you're here just for questions when we get to the number 9, the addendum. Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Seeing no other public, we'll close that part of the agenda at this point in time. So yeah, if you're willing to stick around till we get there, we'll potentially have some questions for you. Thank you. Communications. Are there any communications from the board or committee, I should say, board members, committee members? Have none from the other committee members. Ms. Monty gave me a sheet here that I believe all of you have a copy at your places. She wanted me to announce this free household hazardous waste recycling event to be held Saturday, March 23rd, 2019, from 8 to 3 p.m. Location is 115 South Sangamon Avenue, Gibson City, Illinois 60936. It's sponsored by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, hosted by Ford County Soil and Water Conservation District. Ms. Monty says it's open to all Illinois residents. There is a list of accepted items. Some of them are like fluorescent bulbs, aerosol paints, insecticides, herbicides, oil-based paints. They do have, of course, you can see the list of unacceptable. The big one, they have a no latex paint, and they aren't looking for stuff apparently from agriculture like farm oil, which I assume would be big quantities in part, and agricultural waste and stuff like that. Don't want tires, but Ms. Monty wanted me to make that announcement. And those who may be listening or look at this later, but if it's before March 23rd, can participate in that. And the other, just communication would, Jody has it, but we have copies of the minutes that are proposed by the state's attorney that we can open. They're passing around, so you can just peruse them a little bit, the committee members, to see what they're about before we vote on them. So those are coming around. Other than that, if no one else has thought of anything, we'll close communications. We'll move on then to 7, new business for information only. We have A, selected legislative bills of potential interest. Ms. Monty.
The first item is provided as a reference for you, a hyperlinked list, just for your convenience to see the array of environmentally related bills that you may potentially be interested in and could be potentially relevant to us county residents. So I did call out 4 of those bills in play at present, 2 of which have local sponsors, and 2 of which, the same 2, relate to the Mahomet Aquifer Protections. One creates a council based on the task force that just created their recommendations, and one addresses legacy landfill concerns that were expressed by one of our board members, Chris Storr. I'm not sure to the degree that they do address his concerns, but it does lay out some provisions for identifying legacy landfills. The other 2 bills are carry-out bag fee bills, and it's likely that one of these 2 will pass or a blend of both. One of the bills, Senate Bill 1240, has potentially could serve as a funding source for the counties for some limited amounts of money related to revenue that is created in our county from the sale of plastic bags once this passes, and the other doesn't. So that's why it's worth watching, just to see if a plastic bag fee is going to be created. It would be great if the county could benefit, is my thought, and the thought of many others. So that's it, just an update about some current legislation.
Thank you, Susan. Discussion on this item from the committee members. Oh, Ms. Eisenman.
I have one comment, and I don't know no one probably will have an answer for me, but I think I will call Scott Bennett. I just was interested in the EPA Muhammad Aquifer, the Senate Bill 2027, that when they get the information assembled of what um, companies and industries are generating waste, the resulting records should be available for use as confidential information by regulatory agencies, but not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And I just had a concern about that. I just thought I would love to see that information available to anybody that would want to seek that. I don't know. That was just interesting to me the way that one would be kept confidential. My only thought.
No, understood. I can understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll then move on to B. Illinois Environmental Protection Agency notice of application and public hearing for 401 water quality certification, Dynegy Midwest Generation LLC, Middle Fork, Vermilion Riverbank Stabilization, Vermilion County. Ms. Monty.
Yes, this is another in a series of updates that we have been sharing with you from information provided by the Eco Justice Collaborative watchdog group about the coal ash problem along the Middle Fork. And so the Illinois EPA has issued a notice here, as you see, for a public hearing to occur on March 26th. They will consider a permit application to construct a wall. The Dynegy Midwest Generation has requested that they be issued a permit to construct a wall to contain the coal ash at the riverbank and not to remove the coal ash. So that's what that is, and it's not the desired solution that many are seeking. And what else? Oh, there is an option to consider that could be very effective in stopping Dynegy from leaving the coal ash there or doing, the National Park Service, if we contact them, they have authority to stop any kind of project to further damage the Middle Fork because they have authority under the National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act to protect that river, which is designated as a scenic river in Illinois. So that is an option that is listed here, and one of the two actions encouraged this march to Champaign County residents and anyone.
Thank you, Susan.
There's lots of links to
go ahead.
form letters
Sorry.
and such
Okay.
on the website here.
Sorry for cutting you off there.
Yeah.
Discussion on this. Seeing none, we'll then move on to C, update on dangerous structures enforcement cases. Mr. Hall.
Okay, we do these, we've actually done a couple of these updates. They tend to occur about 2 years apart, and it's been 2 years since we had one. So we started doing these back in 2015 when we realized we had 10 dangerous structures in one township, and we wanted to bring that to the county board's attention. And since that time, we've working with landowners and also working with the county board in a couple of instances. We've taken care of about 8 of those 10 dangerous structures. Most of them have been removed, a couple have been repaired, and a couple are in progress. And so they're at a point where we think they're going to end up in good condition. Right now, the county owns 3 properties that it's acquired through various demolitions of dangerous properties. We're continuing to try to sell those by owner. We haven't had any luck. Later on the agenda, you get an update on the land bank. And if there were a land bank, we might have better luck at selling those properties. But I don't know why we're not having more luck. In most cases, we tell people what the appraised value is. We've had appraisals on these properties. We tell them what the appraised value is. I don't really think we've even had an offer on any of the properties. We continue to replace the for sale sign as we need to. so people know it's for sale. We have not yet listed the properties with any brokers. And we have sent a fourth property for demolition to the state's attorney's office, 404 South Dodson. I hope that we can make some progress on that and make a request for funds for demolition of that, hopefully by summer. I'd like to get that property cleaned up by this summer. That would be the next one. And in the table, you know, there's really no shortage of dangerous structures to come to the county board with. But we've made pretty good progress so far in the past couple of years. It shouldn't be surprising to anybody about how long it takes government to acquire a property, demolish it, clean it up. But it never fails to amaze me how long this process takes. It's a very slow process, but you can see that we are making progress. That's all I have.
Discussion on this, Mr. Goss.
Yeah, the ones I had a question on were the ones in Foosland where we're statuses need to send notice, and we've got something that we had a first complaint on in 2015. Is there a reason we just haven't sent notices?
The reason is that these other dangerous structures, we've gotten more complaints about them, and that's how we prioritize enforcement. But the Foosland properties they definitely need something done with them, and those would be the next properties after 404 South Dodson.
Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll then move on to D, update on Champaign County Land Bank, which, as John mentioned, kind of ties in with the structures enforcement cases. So, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I probably, in retrospect, should have brought this to the committee in January. I was busy with other things. There's been a lot of new information become available recently about the land bank study. They have published their report, which towards the end of it, there is an interesting financial analysis. It's kind of difficult to make sense of, but at least they did a financial analysis. There's the PowerPoint presentation from that December 18th presentation of that study at the RPC. And it's just a PowerPoint presentation, but I think it does provide more good background on land bank. And frankly, land banks are such a different thing. I think any information you could get on a land bank is good to have. At your desk tonight is a handout, date stamp, received February 14th. The timeline for anticipated completion of that Illinois Housing Development Authority contract for the land bank. There's a number of activities there. Most of these are being done by Rantoul Village staff. And at the February 14th meeting, the update was that the consensus was for Rantoul staff to begin investigating for Champaign County jurisdictions who want to join the land bank to join with the Vermilion County Land Bank, trying to pool efforts. Vermilion County Land Bank has been going on for a couple years, having some success. It's definitely gotten more popular in Vermilion County since it started. I would anticipate the same thing in Champaign County. I think there is a need for a land bank. It's just that it's such a difficult creature to try to explain and get going that I think it kind of makes sense to join with Vermilion County, and who knows, at some point maybe it would split off. But I'll try to keep the committee updated on any new information about the land bank. I don't think anything is going to happen soon, but probably in the next 6 months, I would think there would be maybe some things needing county board approval if the county board wants to continue looking at the land bank. And that's all I have on this at this time.
Thank you. Discussion on this. Seeing none, we'll then move on to the E, the memo from Mr. Harkey. John, do you want to speak to this just a little?
Sure. Mr. Hartkey sent us this article having to do with, well, in fact, in his email, he said, please share the article from the North Central Electric Cooperative of Ohio with all of the ELUC members because we don't want another coal ash mess on our hands because information like this was withheld from the decision makers. Now, this article talks about issues with recycling wind turbine blades, wind turbine generators, and solar panels. The issues are quite different in all of those. On the second page of the memo, it talks about how there is progress being made in the recycling of solar panels. For all of the solar farms that the county board recently approved, each of those solar farms needs a decommissioning plan approved. The decommissioning plan should reflect the costs for decommissioning and then recycling or disposing of those solar panels. Obviously, as the solar farms age, I mean, everyone's hope is that the market will provide a means for recycling or disposing of the solar panels. Most of these solar panels have a limited warranty for 25 years, so they should have a real value for a long time. But, you know, even at tearing down a solar farm and getting rid of the panels, I mean, that's a huge undertaking. So it's good to know that progress is being made, and Mr. Hartkey is just trying to keep this at the forefront of everybody's thinking.
Any discussion on this? Seeing none, we will then move on to section 8, new business, items to receive and place on file by ELUC to allow a 60-day review period. We have A, direction regarding proposed zoning ordinance text amendments for 4 photovoltaic solar farm requirements in response to municipal concerns. Is there a motion to receive those proposed text amendments? Moved by Mr. Goss. There's a second by Ms. Eisenman. Okay, we're open for discussion. Mr. Hall, do you want to say anything to start off?
I'll just point out that if you read the municipality letter that we received, some of the things in that letter are not reflected in this proposed amendment. And we've given municipalities a chance to review these amendments. They've been discussed at a RPC technical committee meeting. So even though this doesn't meet the letter of that letter, we've discussed it with the municipal representatives, and I think everybody thinks that this is as good as we can do. And the municipalities have requested the 60-day review period, and we'll be making sure that we get comments from them before the second meeting from now. So I think many of these changes will make it much easier for municipalities to provide comments on solar farms. It will slow down the review times. I don't see a particular problem with that. And even though the minimum separation is proposed to be increased to 1.5 miles, I don't want the committee to think that solar farm developers will all of a sudden find sites outside of the 1.5 miles. I don't think that's going to happen. If we see any more solar farms, they're probably going to be as close to municipalities as the ones we've been seeing to date. And of course, you're free to deny those waivers or deal with it as you think best. But just because we change the ordinance, I don't think it's going to change the characteristics of the sites that they're looking for. But that's what we were asked to do, and it's here.
Mr. Thorson.
So, John, the driver for these changes was the letter from the municipalities, right?
For the changes in this 8A, yes.
Right, for this mile and a half. Now, previous history with the wind farm. We talked a lot about the ETJ. There's always some contention with the ETJ. You had a great map during the wind farm that showed just how much more area this encompasses. There's some states like Texas where the ETJ is very powerful, and Illinois, it seems to be a bone of contention with some things. I personally don't think we should even have this in the ordinance. I think the ordinance with the 0.5 mile now is adequate, and keeping out of the urban growth area is adequate. It would be one thing if we were discussing, like we did with the wind farm, the city of Champaign, where the population is over 80. Most places with an ETJ that can really reach out are triggered by populations over 100,000. And it makes sense if you have an urban center that has 100,000 people in it, that they could have some dictation of what happens a mile and a half out. My former farm hat comes on. The Farm Bureau works very hard to not allow these distant annexations. They're not really on board with the mile and a half. You have a small municipality like Mahomet or St. Joe or Sydney that's trying to dictate what a private landowner wants to do if they want to lease a solar farm. And they're a half a mile away from a place that has a population of 7,000 or 8,000. It seems, for me anyway, to be able to sort of reach way out and say, well, we're not doing anything here now, but I'm thinking about doing something. It'd be like me pushing all of Jim's stuff over here. I don't want you to sit here because I'm thinking about using this whole desk in about 10 years, 20, 30 years from now. So, if you don't mind, I don't want you to put your binder down there, Jim. And, I'm not being facetious entirely, but from a personal experience, I have farm ground that's within the ETJ of Mahomet, so I have a different set of rules if I want to subdivide this at some point than I would have if I was outside of the ETJ. However, I can't go to the Mahomet Village Board, vote for anyone that's on it, vote for anyone that's on the P&Z, and they don't appoint anyone from the ETJ to put on their P&Z. So you have no voice, but they have a voice over you. And I disagree somewhat. I think that when you start out with a mile and a half, these solar farm developers may start to look a little bit further out, provided they can find either a route or a substation that they can connect to. And right now, these municipalities, the substations are closer because that's where the demand is. Wire is waste. Wire is expensive. So I would think that these small municipalities that want to grow in the future should not, at the same time, try to push efficient energy production away from where they want to be. These are not as contentious, I think, as a wind farm. They're quiet at night. Sun's not shining. They're not high up in the sky. And I don't think they have a huge impact. All of the stuff I've read about solar farms and even to some extent wind power and property value effects or cessation of development there doesn't seem to be any actual evidence to say it stops either the plummet of your home value or stopping a town from growing right up to it. So I'm reluctant, extremely reluctant, to change the ordinance to a mile and a half when we already have the urban growth area in there, and that keeps them out. The changes in the other part, and I'm glad this is separated from the other part, I think are a lot more sensible. I would not be in support of this, no matter how long the pickling period is before we vote on it. So, thank you.
Ms. Furtado.
Yeah, I echo all of those, but I also have other concerns. The fourth bullet point, the one about the 5 years, I mean, all solar farms, I would think, are going to exceed 5 years. I mean, are there a lot of solar farms that are short-term solar farms?
No, they're all long-term.
Yeah, so they might as well just say all of them. Like, I don't, like that, I feel is weird.
Well, I don't know that all municipalities are going to enforce their subdivision regulations like that, but there is one that is adamant that they will, and they have the right. They do have the right within the mile and a half. The Illinois Plat Act gives them the right to require a plat for a long-term lease. So I think having this in the ordinance, I mean, the municipalities already have the right. Having it in the ordinance alerts the solar farm developer to, you should expect this to be requested.
The other one, I'd also, why 2 ZBA meetings with the 28-day? I mean, I feel like we saw already with this round that we went through, especially with state funding, the clock, we were up against the clock already, but also there seems like there's multiple opportunities for people to voice their opinions. So like, I don't understand, like, do they really need 2 shots at the ZBA? Like pay attention to what's going on and come to the first ZBA, right? If you have comments, comment at the first ZBA. I don't necessarily understand. Like I could see. I mean, what I think this is limiting the amount of solar farms. All of these, right? I mean, that's going to be the impact of this.
Well, I don't see that as limiting it, but what it is for the smaller municipalities, Champaign and Urbana are just going to sit back and wait till there's a ZBA recommendation, and then they're going to deal with it if they need to. The smaller municipalities want to be involved from the beginning, and you saw how much material we had to give you for the solar farm, and there was multiples of that went to the ZBA. So for the mayors of these smaller villages, they're trying to cope with all that information, and they're responsible for communicating that to their boards. And that is a huge task. And you could say, well, why don't you just wait until there's a ZBA recommendation and then deal with that? In fact, I think they're starting to come around to that way of thinking, because at the meeting where this was discussed, they realized that even with having it at 2 ZBA meetings, there could still be new information at the second ZBA meeting, and they're going to be no better off than they were before. So I think the biggest change is the change to, in the 4th bullet, having it here at ELUC for 28 days. So they have a full meeting cycle to get comments from their board to ELUC before it goes to the county board.
And how,
And so
and how often does the ZBA meet?
the ZBA meets roughly every 2 weeks.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, this would be a 6-week edition, if ever the timing. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, we saw. I don't know. Again, like maybe that doesn't matter if it's in the spring and that lottery thing is going to happen again in the fall. But I mean, this could basically, right,
This
take some projects just out of the running just because of the time frame.
It could. Hopefully, we will never be in that position again where in 1 year we have to develop an ordinance and then review however many developers apply. So I really hope we never have that situation again. But state government being what it is, I can imagine we won't know until the last minute that there's going to be another round. And so who knows, we could be in that position. But at least we've already got an ordinance in place. So we'll be better off.
Mr. Goss, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, I don't think this really matters. I mean, we can put it in there, but there's been no movement by the board or even this committee to stop these things. So I don't really think a mile and a half. I support it, but the reality is everything's been rubber stamped anyway. So they come in and get a waiver. The waiver will be rubber stamped and they'll move on. 50 years is a long time. We don't know what 50 years looks like. And, let's say that, oh yeah, we're keeping these to 10 or 15 acres. The next round, they start to allow 100-acre ones. Now all of a sudden, these small municipalities, it's a big deal to gobble up 100 acres of their stuff for 50 years. So I think it's great that it's in there, but the reality is I don't see this board anytime soon looking at waivers and denying it. It's not been the case. It's always been, oh, it's just this, it's just small, it's really, we can't predict 50 years out. Well, guess what? We can't predict 50 years out. And who knows what the future looks like, and if we get bigger and you start gobbling up 100-acre parcels, then it's a big deal. And so that's why I think there needs to be more of this pushed back, and we need to start to monitor this so we don't have this in the future. But again, I'll be in support of these changes.
Ms. Eisenman.
And I too support him. But here is, I just feel like, and I've said this probably because I've lived in Rancho St. Joe and Mahomet, so I've lived in 3 different villages in the county of Champaign, and so I just feel like truly we're here to represent all of them. And so even in their letter, they said, which it's our board value is to intergovernmental cooperation, collaboration to achieve goals. And I just feel like they're asking us for this. Like, let's work with them and get along. I mean, like, let's get along and collaborate. Like, why can't we just work together? And truly, Mahomet is growing by leaps and bounds. I mean, so who knows what Mahomet's going to look like in 10 to 15 years? My husband graduated in 96, and it's double. I mean, it's a totally different town than it was then. So yeah, there's Sydney's small, and I don't know much about Sydney, but St. Joe and Mahomet, I mean, Mahomet is growing exceedingly. But my thing is that I read several times the comments from the landowners that live near where the solar farm, and I can't remember their names, but it was this gentleman, and he had just found out like the day before the meeting. Like, so like they aren't getting a ton of notice of when to come. And so I think that we should respect that, like, give them a little bit of time to, and like you said, I hadn't even thought of that it takes these smaller communities more time to get all of the paperwork out and into the communities, because it is not all in the central location. So I know that it was several times, several different months that they, like, whoever the homeowner was had said, I just found out about it. Like, I want to say at least 3 to 4 homeowners that just found out about it like the day before the meeting. And if you can't make that one meeting, then guess what? I mean, you aren't. So I think it's only a common courtesy to allow them to have a little bit more time. And they've been here. The Sydney or the Tammy Fruling was here, and she said, I'm not against solar farms. They're not against like saying, no, I don't want them. They're fine with them. They just want a little bit more time to think about it. They want us just to respect these things that are already the ETJ. I mean, that was already something established before us. And like Jim said, when the waiver comes in front of us, we're probably just going to say, go ahead. So I just would encourage to work with these other communities that we do represent in Champaign County. I live in one of them. So, I mean, my village president is right there and signed it. And so I'm in support of it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and placing these on file for the 60-day review period, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. I'm going to say that passed. Did have 2 noes for sure. So that passed. So that will go on the 60-day review period. We'll be seeing it again. Correct. So now we're to 8B, direction regarding proposed zoning ordinance text amendment for photovoltaic solar farm requirements other than in response to municipal concerns. Is there such a motion to receive these for the 60-day? Moved by Ms. King Taylor. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Goss. Mr. Hall, do you want to speak to these first?
There's three proposed changes here, actually only 2 proposed. I was expecting public participation tonight about the middle one, lowering the minimum required credit rating. So I'll discuss that and probably have to bring that back to you. But the first one is eliminating the minimum separation from the PV solar farm to the CR district. It became apparent to me once we fully understood what these solar farms are going to look like, with pollinator habitat planted inside the farm and screening outside if necessary, that in the one case that the county board denied north of St. Joe, it was right next to the CR district. That solar farm developer had agreed to even restore a habitat outside the solar farm. And so Without the solar farm, the land is in production, and that's a good thing. But with the solar farm, it would actually be restoring habitat next to the CR district. And that convinced me that requiring a minimum separation from the CR district just made no sense. I would never go so far as to recommend solar farms be allowed in the CR district, but keeping a minimum separation didn't make sense to me. So that's why this is here tonight. The third thing, authorizing a variance for replacement of a non-conforming structure before the structure is damaged, that is not related to solar farms at all, but it's something that came up recently in a public hearing at the ZBA, and something we've been doing for years. Suddenly, we have a ZBA member who is opposed to it, and it makes so much sense that I wanted to take the first opportunity I could to make this amendment to the ordinance. The situation is this. Non-conforming structures are structures that don't meet the ordinance requirements. They either existed when the ordinance was adopted, or the ordinance was amended and they already existed and they didn't meet some standard in the ordinance. Now, this is a standard having to do with how far the structure is away from the property line, or height, or something related to the structure. All the time we have folks at the ZBA that need some variance on their property for something they want to do, and in the process we find out, oh my gosh, their house is non-conforming. They couldn't rebuild their house if it were damaged unless they came to get a variance. And so, since I've been involved with the ZBA starting in 2002, we've been letting people include that as a request, even though that's not the actual wording of the ordinance. The ordinance says you can only do that after it's been damaged. That makes no sense to me. Why wait until we have a tornado for someone to be able to seek that variance? And so that's why this is included here. I can do this in another variance case if that would be better for ELUC, but I wanted to get this done as soon as possible. Now, the middle thing, lower the minimum required credit rating for local financial institutions that provide financial assurance. I was contacted by someone who is on the board of a local bank. I'm assuming that local bank doesn't meet the current minimum requirements of A by Standard & Poor's or A2 by meetings. Talking with employees of that bank is rated by Kroll Bond Rating Agency, which is another one of the 10 or 12 rating agencies. And I have not yet been able to find a table that equates Kroll bond ratings with Standard & Poor's and Moody's, but all the bond ratings have about the same number of ratings, and it looks like the Kroll bond rating for this local bank may be one level lower than what we currently have as the minimums under Standard & Poor and Moody's. So the question as posed to me is, well, would the county board be willing to lower the credit rating some amount to keep that business as local business? It's a difficult thing to evaluate, but that's really what was proposed. And so I told them that I would put it in my memo, but I wanted them to be here tonight to actually make the proposal. There's nobody here. I don't think that means they've changed their mind. I think that means that probably I should have called them one more time to remind them about the meeting. So I hope to have someone here at the next meeting to discuss this. I don't want to rush this. On the other hand, if it makes sense, then it's a good change. And I'm not able to really evaluate that with the information I have. But that's these three changes. And again, I'm not proposing to do anything on these now, but just keep them here and let them move along with the municipal requests.
Mr. Goss.
Yeah, I was contacted by a local bank as well under the same context, and they said, well, we're not sure we want the business, but we're not rated by Moody's or Standard & Poor's. That's really only the very, very large banks that can afford to be rated by those services. And they said, so we'd kind of like to be at least in position if we have a correct rating. I think maybe they were Kroll too. I can't, he told me, and I've got it written in some notes on my desk, but he said, we simply can't afford to be rated by Standard and Poor's and Moody's. And so, I remember when we talked about this, we struggled with how to come up with it as well. It's not like we just threw a dart on a dartboard. We kind of just, that's what we knew.
The minimum ratings that are in the ordinance now are the same minimum requirements that an East Coast, the entity that is in charge of the East Coast power grid, it's the same minimum standards they require for any improvements to their grid. And so that makes a certain amount of sense. And to me, it makes a certain amount of sense if we have a strong local bank, but that isn't rated by Moody's and Standard and Poor's, then maybe this makes sense. I just, like I said, I have not yet found a way to compare the three ratings companies, so it's way over my head, but I'm willing to investigate it.
Yeah, I think we could find somebody that maybe can help us out in one of the financial institutions, and I'll see if I can't remember to make a phone call in the next day or two to see if somebody's got, there's certainly got to be some sort of chart somewhere that this is how they equate. I haven't found anything either, so.
And I will say that getting on the internet, it is a lot easier to check ratings with the Kroll agency than it is with Standard and Poor's or Moody's. So no, it's free, but you've got to know exactly the right name to put into the search engine.
Mr. Thorland.
Yeah, I was going to sort of echo what Jim said. What John, since this is going to also sit for a while, can we make sure we have someone here for the next meeting, either your contact or John's contact, or at least some information on it? Because I don't, I'm not frequently shopping for a rated bank to do anything with my 68 cents. So I am in the dark. The other two are a different story, but I'm in the dark on that, and I want to know more about it.
Further discussion, Ms. Furtado.
Yeah, I think it's important to give local financial institutions the opportunity to participate. We definitely just don't want our wording to somehow preclude them. I do have a question. Do we anticipate, and I should have probably asked this on the other one, like that when these come up, it's going to be a yes, no vote? I mean, after we get public comment on all of them together, right? Because there's some of the stuff that I would support and some that I wouldn't. So is it going to be like, hey, vote yes or no for all of these changes, or might there be an opportunity to break some of it into separate votes?
We can, in the legal advertisement, and this would be something I would appreciate direction from the committee on, we could break these out so that they could all get voted on eventually, but they don't have to be voted as one big group. We can certainly do that.
Looks like, John, I'd say pretty much everybody, it looks like it's saying that they'd like it broken out. I'll just ask, would each one individually, or are there suggestions of groupings, or do we want to send like emails to John maybe or something within the next, how quick would you?
Oh, I won't need that until this comes back to you 2 months from now.
Okay, so we've got
And-
some time, so maybe just drop your,
And there is a staffing cost to, I mean, if everything is breaking out as an individual case, then you've seen the paperwork we generate for every case. So it would be good to identify the minimum number of packages that you'd like to have to vote on. Because each package has to have a complete finding of fact, and, it's just more work.
is everyone satisfied with, the explanation, and to maybe send can obviously call John, come into his office, send emails, whatever, but we don't need them immediately. Further discussion on the receiving and placing the three text amendment proposals. Mr. Patterson.
How do we define local? Do we have a standard for that, or is that just?
That's an excellent question. How do we define local? to me, local means a Champaign County, having a branch in Champaign County. Now, having a branch means it could be a large national bank with a branch in Champaign County. But I think once you make the decision to treat local, I think anybody that has a branch locally is going to be local. So that's just my gut feeling. And if the committee wants a different interpretation, I would need to know that within 2 months.
Further discussion before we vote to receive, place these on file or not? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. We'll move on then to 9, new business, items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, resolution approving the application for and, if awarded, acceptance of a 2019 Illinois Counties Solid Waste Management Association mini grant. I'll let Ms. Monty speak to this first, if she wants to, before we even ask for a resolution, just because we did get the information at our desk tonight. So Ms. Monty?
Yes. This is a small grant in the amount of $1,250 that is there for the asking, more or less. And eligibility requirements are pretty stringent. And so my initial idea about having something related to the electronics collections wasn't going to fly because that was not among the eligible grant focus items. So I had to switch that instead to one listed as an eligible item, and that I chose pharmaceuticals because there's an upcoming pharmaceutical collection that the City of Champaign Police Department puts together with the Champaign County Crime Stoppers this coming April 20th, and it's part of the DEA National Take Back Day. And so hardly any advertising happens for these, and I thought, why not get some funds for a digital sign to promote this event? So that's what this is.
Okay, thank you. I guess maybe before, does someone care to make a motion or discussion before we have a motion? Ms. Furtado?
I have a question. It's more about the form than about, I think this is a great grant. I really like this form about like sort of analyzing the grant's impact on the department. As somebody used to make these forms, I think it's a really good one. My one question is, I don't see anywhere on here if there's like matching costs. Am I missing that? Or is there, so there's no matching costs, I guess, with this grant probably, like.
Right.
but-
There's two categories about whether or not this can be a standalone kind of project.
Where-
Or does it
sorry,
need support? It's down, but where it says, please check the following condition which applies to this grant application. The activity or service provided can be terminated in the event,
Okay,
or the activity should be assumed by the county, that kind of thing. So there's that concern.
okay, yeah.
But the match question is not addressed in this cover
Okay.
letter. This cover needs to be adjusted too, because Finance Committee does not need to see these.
Okay.
So there's some minor revisions that need to happen to
Yeah,
this.
that might be a good idea. Like, and maybe like thinking about match in terms of, you did say staff time and you do say office time, but maybe cash or other, maybe, there could be other like use of equipment or something like that. But I think the form is great. I like it really. I think it's fantastic, and I think the project sounds fantastic as well.
Further discussion, or someone care to make the motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland. Is there a second? Seconded by King Taylor. Further discussion? Or maybe somewhat doing it out of order technically, but since we haven't seen it in our packages, I don't believe it's especially at committee level, I think we can use Robert's rules more of a guideline. Don't have to. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll then move on to B, resolution approving the application for and, if awarded, acceptance of a 2019 American Water Environmental Grant. And Susan, do you want to speak to this one a little bit first, too, please?
This application is for $3,500, and it will go to support content for the website and use by the Champaign County Stormwater Partnership, which is a collaborative group forum to address MS4 kind of program issues and learn from each other. And part of the implementation of the MS4 involves educating the public about certain green infrastructure, greenhouse keeping, minimizing the volume of stormwater runoff, decreasing and reducing non-point source pollution, essentially. So these funds would be used to develop digital content or graphics for use by the Champaign County Stormwater Partnership.
Thank you. Discussion on this, or if someone cares to go right to a motion. Either it would be moved by Mr. Goss, is there seconded by Ms. Furtado? Still open for discussion if anybody has any comments or questions they want to make. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll then move on to the addendum C. We have zoning case 924-AM-19. A request by Eric and Kylie Miller, doing business as Miller Farms Barn, to amend the zoning map to change the zoning district designation from AG1 agriculture to AG2 agriculture in order to establish and operate a rural event center as a combination private indoor recreational development and outdoor commercial recreational enterprise as a special use permit in related zoning case 925-S-19 on a 10.2 acre tract of land in the east half of the northeast quarter of section 28 of Township 21 North, Range 10 East of the 3rd Principal Meridian in Compromise Township and commonly known as the Farmstead at 2079 County Road 2600 North, Gifford. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Thorsland, seconded by Mr. Patterson. Discussion. John, do you want to speak to this first or mention anything?
Well, for the Millers to do what they're wanting to do, they need to get the land rezoned, Ag 1 to Ag 2. That in and of itself really doesn't change anything. The uses permissible by right in those two zoning districts are the same. But what having the Ag 2 rezoning allows is then they can get this special use permit for the event center. Now, the ZBA has not taken action on the event center. They continued the case to March 28th, but they went ahead and forwarded this to the committee because, again, just approving the map amendment doesn't make any change in the use of the land. It all depends on the special use permit. This was recommended unanimously by the ZBA at their meeting. That's all I have unless there are questions.
And just remember, Mr. Miller is here if we have any questions. He's graciously stayed thus far. Discussion, questions. Mr. Thorsland.
If Mr. Miller could come up just so, people feel more free to ask questions.
And then just have to turn the microphone on with the red light. Did it come on? There you go. Well, I think it pushed it 1, 2. There you go. It's on. So go ahead, Mr. Thorsland.
Yeah, we're talking about the map amendment alone. In case you don't know, I spent 10 years on the zoning board, and typically we ran these in parallel. So it's not always that we get a map amendment without yet having the special use in front of us. But we can see what you're up to with what's here. The only things I saw that kind of jumped out is there's a recommendation to come up with a good life safety plan, which isn't totally tied to the map amendment, but I want to get that sort of out there now that you're going to try to develop a good life safety plan since you're so far away from EMS and from fire. It sounds like a reasonably good idea. Um, those rowdy weddings, they can get out of hand pretty quick. Depending upon who's sitting on which side of the aisle. So I just wanted to verify that you took that under consideration.
Yes, Chief McFadden, he's planning on coming out Sunday or Monday. He said he'd let me know. We'll get a little closer to time here and try to discuss some things.
Okay. And if, the hard question asked is if we didn't grant the map amendment, the special use permit then doesn't happen, do you have a sort of a plan B for the property, or is this something you really want to do?
We just acquired the property, and it's something me and my wife really want to do. The barn has sat empty for the past 20 years. It was previously used as a dairy barn. We've started some renovations just because there was no electricity or nothing out there. My family lives across the street. That's where I grew up. So all farming operations are really across the street. Livestock, stuff like that. I have another shed on the property we've currently got some ag equipment in, but this barn we don't really need it for much other than what me and my wife want to do with it. So.
Okay. Is there any other Ag 2 uses? I'm sure John showed you the rather long list of what you can do in Ag 2. Because if we make it Ag 2, then it's Ag 2 sort of, unless for some reason you come back and ask to make it Ag 1 again, which doesn't ever happen. Is there any other use you would think about in the future in this? You get bored of weddings, or people stop getting married and you want to do something else?
It's really just events, weddings, and other social events like that. If this were to fall through, I suppose livestock or something moving across the street could happen, but it's not anywhere on our radar right now.
Okay, that's all I have.
Ms. Eisman.
I have two questions for you. The one, and I just got this, so I haven't got to read very much, but this one popped out in when I was reading through it right here. It just said that on page 4, letter G, the petitioner shall ensure that guests are made aware of the county ordinance that the noise past 10 p.m. should be in compliance. And are you going to have the receptions over at 10 p.m.? That seems early.
I was informed that it's not supposed to be audible at the property line
Okay.
at 10 p.m. We will work with them to turn it down as it will be inside. We do have letters from all the neighbors
Okay.
supporting it, and if should an issue arise, I will take necessary action to bring it down. We are going to definitely monitor the first one and keep noise levels not audible at the property line. So.
Got it. That just seems early. I feel like most weddings you don't start dancing until 9. And then one other question, and I don't even know where I saw it, and I just was flipping through. But do you have plans to make paved parking? Or do you have enough grass that it'll be fine? Or
We are paving. It changed as of the last meeting, but a good majority of it will be gravel. We're talking about enough space for 100 vehicles per the zoning requirements,
Okay.
with handicap spaces and everything like that. So
Okay. Right. That's exciting to have it out there. There's
Thank you.
nothing really out in that area.
Further discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passed unanimously. And again, just for the committee members, of course, if you want to keep it off now, just say so, and we'll keep it off the consent agenda, or you can wait up until the actual board meeting, because any one of us,
I think it should stay
Yeah.
off the consent agenda.
you'd like to
Just
keep this off the
because
consent agenda, Mr. Lawrence.
There's
That's
enough
fine.
detail in there that
That's fine.
it should
So
be-
we'll keep it off the consent agenda at the regular board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for staying, and appreciate your willingness to do so.
thank you.
Okay, we'll move then on to 10, old business. We have A, resolution appointing recycling coordinator for Champaign County. It's a revisit. it was not taken to the February county board meeting. We need a resolution, motion on this again, if someone cares to make such a motion. Moved by Ms. Furtado, seconded by Mr. Thorsland. John, do you want to speak to this just a little bit?
We did not take it to the February County Board because we were, Ms. Kleppel had raised some questions about exactly how this should be done, so we didn't do anything then. Since then, Susan has coordinated with Ms. Kleppel, and we have a resolution all set for the county board on this, and we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on this. Oh, go. Yes, Ms. Monty, go ahead, Susan.
It's technically not an appointment, it's a designation. So the resolution will read designation.
Thank you for pointing that out. All ready to vote? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passes. So that, John, would that just go on the consent agenda too?
If you could,
Yeah, I
please.
mean, yeah, since we haven't, it was unanimous, so. Okay, we'll then move on to 11, other business. We have A, the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. I believe you all should have gotten an email that state's attorney reviewed them. There are the two that they say we can open up. Everybody had the chance to peruse those minutes and see what they were about. We have the August 2nd, 2011, and the January 8th, 2015 minutes from closed session that the state's attorney says we can open. Would somebody care to make such a motion, I should say, moved by Mr. Goss and seconded by King Taylor to open those two committee, or those two closed session minutes? I guess, any discussion, which I guess would almost be if you were just opposed to opening them since they aren't truly opened yet. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you, that passed. We have the monthly report then, B, from January 2019. Is there any discussion on that? From the committee members, or if Mr. Hall wants to say anything? Seeing none, we will receive and place those on file. Presiding officers report. Don't have anything. Designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. We have 9A, B, and 10A. And with that, if there's no objections, we're adjourned. Thank you and have a safe trip home.